Hi, I'm Tricia at Club Scrap. This is your Christmas Legacy Card Kit Workshop. We're going to have a blast making a total of 12 cards together. We've got the single fold, just basic card structure, and then this nice double flap gatefold with the belly band, and then finally a set of double Z folds. These are going to be fun too, and I've got everything really figured out for you, so let's just take it step by step and we'll recreate these cards together. Now I've got my kit here with my printed instructions. If you choose not to print your instructions, no problem. Save the paper for the scrapbook, right? So I'm going to set this aside, and then here is my kit. Of course, the envelopes. These are all 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. The reason for the size here is that we want you to be able to include a 4 by 6 family photo with your Christmas cards. And since our photos print most economically at 4 by 6 inches rather than those premium charged 4 by 8s. This is why we chose to do this size, and it tends to work great. We've done this for a number of years and people really seem to like it. I personally do it that way as well. So I'm going to set aside the ribbons and the other fun embellishments in here. We've got these cool enamel dot stickers here and some other fun flats. I'm really working hard to keep my card embellishments flat for mailing without worry, right? Okay, so for starters, we're going to take all the paper that came in the box and put it in its proper order, which is the order that we're going to be trimming it. So let's start out by finding the wine. Now there's a metallic berry in here, and there's this like a deep brick red. That's what I'm calling wine. For the ivory, I need 1 sheet, and you're going to find that it has a very deep texture. I'm just going to put it face down on my stack with the texture side down so that we're working with it right side up. And then same is true for this champagne metallic. This too has a texture. And then 1 sheet of the berry metallic. That's stunning. I love that one. Okay, next up, we're going to go for the green texture side, face down. Then the champagne again. Texture side down, berry metallic, and wine. All this paper we're going to trim with great purpose. Next, green, texture down, the remaining ivory, texture down, and then 2 prints, face down. And then we've got our Cutaparts. So we're going to look for the Cutapart that has May the Miracle of Christmas in the upper left. These 2 shapes, smaller shapes down over here, and then finally your last sheet. So all of it's going to be trimmed. There will be very little waste. In fact, I saved the waste from my original set of prototypes here, and this is what I had left over. I probably could have found homes for more of this by punching out shapes or whatever, but this is all that. From all of this, this is the only thing you're going to have left over. And the fun part is you're going to have this too. Okay, so I flipped, we started here, and I'm going to flip it back over so that that wine is on the top, and let's get trimming. Before we do, I just grabbed my accordion pocket file. This is going to house all of the pieces we trimmed for set A, B, and C, and then I'll set aside anything that needs to be scored for the time being as well into another separate pile on my work surface somewhere. Okay, so starting with the wine, we're going to determine the grain direction. So hold by an edge, and I want the paper to be flexing easily from top to bottom. So to compare, if I hold from this edge, do you see how stiff the paper is? And this way, it bends very easily. So make sure your paper wiggles easily from top to bottom. If you're new on that, it's an important step because eventually we're going to fold the paper in that direction. We want it to cooperate with the fold. So here, same thing. This edge seems very stiff. This is very floppy. We want it flopping easily top to bottom. Using my guillotine trimmer here from Fiskars. If you don't already have this, or a really good quality trimmer that you absolutely love that you can measure with, I do recommend picking this up if you don't have it already, because it just removes all the obstacles to your success, right? Okay, so now let's start out by trimming both of these sheets at the same time. If you're brave enough, if you're not, just, do one at a time and then repeat. We're gonna go at 10 1/2. So I always look at the inches, not the centimeters. Go to the left for every 1/4 inch from the whole number. So 10, 10 1/4, that's 10 1/2. Always make sure your paper is level up at the top and then pushing down on that clear bar. And then I slide down to 6 1/4. Stabilize again. Really firmly. because you're trimming two pretty heavyweight papers. The trimmer can trim it just fine, but if it wiggles, you know, you're not going to have a straight cut. Next, I'm going to rotate this larger piece and cut at 9. And that's going to be 2 card bases, which I'll set aside to be scored later. And then you have this little rectangle here that fell off the end. We're going to trim that at 4 3/4. This will go into pocket B, and this will go in D. That's where I store my scraps until I decide whether they actually are scraps or if I can rescue them. And the next strip, which is currently 4 1/4 by 12, we'll trim at 6. This pair will go in pocket A and the other into C. And then you have this long strip we're going to trim at 10. These bands go in pocket B, and then you have a scrap for D. So it's not yet a scrap until it, you know, until it's really a scrap. All right, now let's do all of that again with 2 more sheets. So we're going to take the taupe metallic or the champagne color, check our grain, making sure it's dipping from top to bottom, and we'll repeat. So our first cut was at 10 1/2. If you need to slow me down, you can do that by changing your playback speed on YouTube to 0.75. That'll really slow me down. All right, so 10 1/2, stabilize, and then slide to 6 1/4. Notice that I'm letting the paper just pile up here to the right of the trimmer. That's best practice. That way I know where it is and you know where it is. And then rotate, and we're going to cut at 9 to make 2 more card bases. Set these aside to be scored in that other pile, and then grab the rectangle that fell off the end. We'll cut this at 4 3/4. Pocket B and D for the little guy there. This next larger strip we're going to cut at 6 again. This pair in pocket A and the next pair in pocket C. The final strip we'll trim at 10. And then this one goes in pocket B with the others, and more for pocket D. That's everything for the first diagram on our instructions. So we're moving on to this one, and you can see the arrow here. And that again tells you which way the paper needs to flop in order to have the grain direction in the right spot. Okay, so I'm checking here. We want it dipping this way on the green, and then this metallic definitely wants to go this way. All right, it's so heavy. It feels like 2 sheets there. Okay, this is an entirely different cutting plan, so pay attention. All right, here we are at 10 this time, 10 inches, and then 6 1/4. We'll rotate, and we're going to create a small scrap type strip here. By trimming at 11 3/4, it's going to give us a really small piece. And then 9. Set this aside to be scored. And this rectangle will trim at 4 1/2. Place this in pocket B. Then grab the small rectangle, and we're actually going to trim it at 1 3/4. And what's nice, even with this large trimmer, because of that bar, I can create the square easily at 1 3/4. So this square goes in B, and then this is a scrap. I'm going to pop that in D, but it'll probably end up in the circular file. This too, I think I may have used these, I don't know, but I'm going to pop them in D for now. And then this next strip, measuring 3 3/4 by 12, this one we're going to trim at 11 and place it in the pile to be scored. This is for D. And the next strip we're going to cut in half at 6 inches. And place all of this, both of them, in pocket B. We get to do that one more time now with the metallic berry. Check your grain, dipping top to bottom, and then the wine, same thing. First cut, 10 inches. And then 6 1/4. Stabilize always. Let's create that small scrap by cutting at 11 3/4. And then 9. This goes in the pile to be scored. We'll trim at 4.5. Pocket B. Take the smaller rectangle and trim at 1 3/4. Stabilize. Now you've got a nice square here, also going in B. Scraps for D. More scraps for D. And then this next piece, we'll trim at 11. This goes in my pile to be scored. Pocket D. And finally, the last strip, we'll cut at 6. And all of it goes in B. Turning the page now, and we'll take the green. Once again, checking your grain direction to dip easily top to bottom. Got a pattern here for sure. And same with the ivory, dipping top to bottom. Your first cut is at 9. And then 4.5. Be sure to stabilize firmly. Rotate and cut at 11 3/4. This is going to become a card base, so that gets scored. And then we've got these 2 tiny pieces. I'll just pop those again in D. Grab the next pair. This again is 4.5 by 12 right now. We're just going to cut it a little piece off again. So 11 3/4. Pocket D, or sorry, this gets set aside to be scored, and then this goes in pocket D again. Then we've got this pair, this last pair here at 9.5 and 4 3/4. These 2 sets of rectangles go in pocket A, and then we've got some scraps for D. And now we switch to the print. All right, I think I'm gonna pop this in my trimmer so that the quatrefoil shape feels vertical rather than horizontal. And I'll cut at 11 1/4. And if you don't want to do it that's fine. It's just something I recommend because I feel like this is right side up. Again, that's 11 1/4. Then 9.5. 7 3/4. 6. 4 1/4. All right, take the 4 1/4 inch piece, rotate. We'll trim at 10, 7.5, 5, 2.5. And that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. That should be the same, going in pocket C. Now this last rectangle is actually a scrap for D. And then I'm going to take 2 more pieces. These are the same width, and I'm going to put them back to back so that the white is touching, and that'll make it less slippery so we can cut them both at the same time. Our first cut is at 11.5, and then 5 3/4. And if you want, you can face them back correctly again and place in pocket B. Let's repeat that process. You did create these little scraps. Like those, I feel confident I can pitch them in the circular file. And I'm gonna take the next 2 strips, face them white on white, and we'll go 11.5 again. And 5 3/4. Let's reverse that and put it in pocket B. And we got 2 more little scraps. And then I'll take the other print. I'll do the same thing and keep it right side up. Our first cut's at 10.5. And then 7. And 3.5. You can gather up these 2. You can do white on white again. They're the same. And we'll trim at 10.5 and 5 1/4. That should give you 4 rectangles that are the same going into pocket A. And then you have these two little rectangles, we're actually going to trim them horizontally at 3 and 1.5. And again, same story here. I get to use my index finger to hold it, and that gives me a nice square shape here. So I'm going to flip the plain side back up to the print. My 4 squares will go in pocket B, and I do have 2 more really tiny little scraps. I'm just going to get rid of those. Now this next strip here we'll trim at 10, 7.5, 5, and 2.5. And you just made 4 squares the same. 4 going C, and then the rectangle D. Now I realized I have 2 scraps left here. One is from the previous print, and then this one is from the one we just did. They both go in pocket D. And we're moving on to the Cutaparts, and I'll mention now for my newcomers, we need to remove the outer perimeter of the sheet according to that registration mark that we've printed on there. And that's going to give us a nice, accurate start to our trimming. And I usually cut a little shy of the mark on my first go. And once I do that, I can really see the edge of the blade, both at the top and the bottom corner of the sheet. And then do your best to really line that up accurately to remove it. The line itself, I pretty much want that gone. Now when I make this turn, I can look over here at the 12-inch mark, and I can see I'm landing really nicely. And this last one is going to be like a shaving. What kind of a shaving? That's about how much I was able to take off with this beautiful trimmer. So I'm going to throw away all these little scraps and place this on my trimmer so that May the Miracle is in the left corner, and you got these skinny strips on the right. Our first cut here is 9.25. And then 4 3/4. Rotate, and we'll cut at 9, 6, 3. So all the odd numbers here, all the numbers divisible by 3 actually. 9, 6 is an even number, and then 3. All right, so these 4 panels, the same, go in C. The next strip we'll cut at 11, 8 1/4, 5 1/2, and 2 3/4. All right, these 2 go in pocket A. And the next 2 also A. And these I'm going to use in A as well. Okay. Next, this is going to go horizontally with these shapes on the right. We're just going to cut out all the even numbers, I believe. Yes, 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2. All right, the one that was ended in the trimmer, so basically at the top of your stack, that's A. Then 1, 2, 3, 4 Merry Christmases go in B. And then these go in B as well. One more sheet to trim. Go ahead and remove those outer strips, anything beyond the hash marks, the little plus signs. That's got to go so that we end up with a nice 12 by 12. And the reason I say this while you're doing it, a lot of people who are newer say, why do we have to do this step? And it's because the larger commercial trimmers just don't get it quite accurately enough, because the paper can tend to slip a little bit, and I want to make sure it's a good start for us when we begin trimming these into sections. This again is the cute little scrap that we created there. And now I want to make sure that this goes in the trimmer this way. So it's kind of sideways. It wouldn't seem like Christmas should be here, and then a second one, and then Merry Everything on the right, okay? So when you're cutting it, this is gonna make the most sense. So we'll trim at 8 1/2 and 4 1/4. And if you want, you can stack these together because it's the same. We'll cut at 10, or you can do them one at a time. 7 1/2, 5, and 2 1/2. Okay, all of the pieces that fell off, except for the skinniest ones that came off first. These all go in pocket B. And then the two Merry Christmas, Merry Everything and a Happy Always, those both go into A. Then we have this last strip. It's kind of like a repeat, so 10, 7.5, 5, 2.5. All of that goes into C except the skinnier panel going in A. So these four the same, pocket C. That's everything, every paper we had lined up there. So next we're going to kind of go back. I'm going to go in reverse and we're going to score all those pieces we set aside. So I'm going to swap my trimmer for my score pal. I helped pack our shipments for the first of the month, and there were a lot of score pals going out the door, so it's good to see. As you advance in your card making, a tool like this is something you'll never regret having. If you don't have one yet, I believe we may even need to restock, but grab a score pal when you see them. It's a wonderful little tool. I use mine with a metal tipped stylus. I carry these as well. The largest ball on this tip, on the one that doesn't have anything on the other side, works really well for scoring. Okay, so I'm going to start out with this 4.5 by 11 3/4 inch piece of ivory. And we're going to start a smooth side up. Okay, so there's a texture and a smooth. And I'll score it 6 1/4. And then I'm going to flip the paper and score it 9. So I'll take the green again, smooth side up, score it 6 1/4, flip bottom to top and score it 9. So make sure you're not rotating. Again, the next sheet in my pile is ivory. So on the smooth side, we'll go 6 1/4. And I'll flip bottom to top and score it 9. Again, smooth side up, 6 1/4, flip, and score at 9. Now, if you don't want to worry about smooth and flipping and everything, you can just score at those two measurements. But the reason I did that is so eventually when we do create this card and fold it properly, the texture side will be facing up. And all of these are going to be used in set C. So I'm going to grab my accordion pocket file, which I then keep on its back on my work surface. Next, we're going to score these smaller panels. This time, if there is a texture, it would be texture side up, but this is smooth, so it's not going to matter. We'll score it 5 1/2, and then flip bottom to top and score it 8 1/4. The next one, 5 1/2, flip, 8 1/4. Now dig a little deeper in your stack to find the other two. Texture side up, score it 5 1/2, flip, 8 1/4. And this time, texture side is up, score it 5 1/2, flip, 8 1/4. Okay, so all of this is going to go in pocket C along with those other larger double scored pieces. Next, we'll take this berry color. This is currently 6 1/4 by 9, and we'll score it 2 1/4. And 6 3/4. That's it. No flipping or anything. 2 1/4, 6 3/4. This next one, texture side up, 2 1/4, 6 3/4. Texture side up on this last one, 2 1/4, 6 3/4. These four are used in set B. And finally, we get to do the simple of all, most simple of all, 6 1/4 by 9, horizontally in here, score it 4 1/2. And that's basically just scoring in half, 4 1/2. Texture side was up. Same on this ivory, 4 1/2. And for the wine, 4 1/2. Okay, and these are the card bases for set A, so I'll put those in the pocket. I'll get rid of my score pal. Let's get ready to make some cards. The first thing we will do is take everything out of pocket A. And sometimes people say, and does it matter how I load it? No, it doesn't, because everything just comes out like this. And what I like to do is just put everything into a size grouping. So go from largest to smallest. And that way it's just a little easier to sort through things when we do the assembly, or distribution rather. Now, I'm going to start out with these card bases and simply fold them in half. Every score line that we made earlier, and this is why I kind of paid attention, it has an indentation on one side and a bump on the other. So the bump side is what goes on the inside of the fold. And if you're new, the best way to remember that is simply the alliteration, bury the bump. So here we have a bump. Let's bury it inside the fold. And if you want to just burnish, so bury the bump and burnish. How about that? There we go. Make sure your edges are nice and lined up before you make the crease, so you have a perfect foundation for your card. Okay, so for our first distribution of the 4 card bases, let's start with the wine here, and then that very metallic. Those will be our 2 vertical cards, and then I'm going to go with that champagne and the ivory linen. Now I can take the entire stack of all the rest of these cards, and I go from largest to smallest basically as I distribute all the rest of the pieces. Now there should be a champagne metallic. Make sure the texture is facing up when you lay it down onto the card base. And then the ivory, same thing here. Just keep track of your texture. This has a beautiful linen. Then the berry metallic, and then the wine. So now there's a print. There should be 4 of them, and that should scale down to nest perfectly to have a nice reveal of the under layers there. Then we have another panel of a contrasting color. So let's go with the ivory texture here, our green, and then another green and an ivory. Then we can have our sentiments. You're the most wonderful part. Both of these are vertical. I'm going with the red on this one and the green here. And then be filled with wonder and touched by peace. We have 2 of those. Now for the inside. Merry Christmas will be on each of these, and then Merry Christmas and Merry Everything and Happy Hours on the inside of those horizontal cards. Yes. Okay, then we have these 4 sprigs and berries. I'm going to share my quick secret here with you. This is not something that I know is even available anymore. It's an old McGill punch, but here's the important thing. I'm using something old from my stash. A punch in the shape of a postage stamp. If you would like, and you have something like this, or maybe another shape, maybe it's a circle. As long as it's about 1 inch, you can pop out a punch. And again, this may no longer be available. That's okay. Don't get hung up on what it is. Just think, oh, what do I have in my stash that I can utilize to have some fun with these little extra art pieces? Okay, so it's our custom now to stack these other card samples. In fact, what I am going to do to make this really easy on myself is slide everything for these cards into some envelopes, because we don't need to make all, since they all assemble the same way, we don't need to make all 4 of them together. In the interest of time, you can certainly just repeat, right? Okay, so now here we are with card 1. So now I'm going to take this printed panel and attach it to my next to last panel here before the card. And now let's attach this to our largest mat with a reveal of 3/8 of an inch. Okay, that's 3 cubes, in other words, from the left edge, top edge, right edge, and left edge. So 1, 2, 3 cubes, 1, 2, 3 from the top, 1, 2, 3 from the left, and it's perfectly centered. Now, before I attach this to my card base, I'm going to grab my widest ribbon and cut a length. I'm just going to kind of place it diagonally across the card and trim a length. And then I'll take some tape, 2 pieces, and make sure that this ribbon is running in cooperation with the grain. Do you see how it curves? Here how it bobs? You want to go with the curve, okay? Wrap it at a diagonal and secure the ends on the back. Next, I can safely attach this to my card base, and this one gets just 1/8 of an inch reveal, so that's 1 cube from the edge. And I'm always just using the ruler to help make sure that my card doesn't end up being placed onto the base, crooked, which is my tendency. All right, next up, we're gonna nest the sentiment panel onto the contrasting panel. In this case, it is ivory, so there isn't a lot of contrast, but that's okay. And I'm not going to use any foam adhesive in this whole assembly process just because I want it to be flat enough where by the time I add a picture that I'm not getting too large on my card. And my reveal on this is going to be 1/4 of an inch. In other words, 2 cubes. That is so lovely. You can see the ribbon going through, just so nice. Now, when I open the card, let's think, what can we do on this? I'll show you what I did do. I went into pocket D and took pretty much just everything out of the pocket. So I can see what I've got. I got all these little scraps. I got some prints here. Lots of potential, right? Now I'm going to take this long strip. I'm going to cut it at, let's see what they do. I think it was 5 3/4. Yes, 5 3/4. Now save the longer piece. We're going to use that on a different card. And if you happen to have a corner rounder, I'm going to use the 1/4 inch radius and just round these corners for something special. And I will adhere this to the right edge of my card. So in this case, I'm going to allow about 3/8 of an inch. And again, I'll use my ruler since I'm attaching this strip. I don't want it to be crooked. Then I'll grab my Merry Christmas. I used the longer Merry Christmas on my original sample, but this is fine. This will work. I'm going to trim a little piece from this metallic champagne color to 1 1/8 square so I can nest the postage stamp onto it. Now, you don't have to do that. I'm just showing you what I did so that if you would like to replicate this exactly and you just happen to have a postage punched, you can do that. Otherwise, you could just do a standard square. Just use a trimmer to cut these out, but I think it just adds a little something sweet to the card. There you go, Merry Christmas. That is so lovely, but not quite as lovely as it could be, my friends. I've got a little pile of embellishments here, and I'm going to take this golden triangle here and use my bookbinding glue from a needle tip applicator to go around the edges, all the little pieces for sure that are furthest to the top. There's definitely is a right side and a wrong side to this embellishment as well. So just kind of be aware of that, and I'll center that into the space. Because I'm using a wet glue, it gives me the ability to move it around a little bit. And I attached that last. Notice I didn't do it before I did the inside of the card. I did it last. Now I can set it aside to dry, and here is our perfect replica of the card. And I'm going to pop this kind of next to the envelope and set it aside with the 3 others. I'm going to grab this 6 1/4 inch piece and put it into the other unit. And this is kind of ready to go now for replication 3 times over. Now, before we move on, I'll show you the other cards. The 2 vertical ones are the same. So we have the little inner decoration. There's the other 6 1/4 inch print. And then here are the horizontal cards. And I just chose to place this piece underneath, sort of overlapping all of the layers. And then I used a narrow strip. The wine and the metallic berry colors are available, and then I matted this for the inside as well. And in fact, there's a really nice amount of space for that to be added on those 2 little inner Cutaparts. Now we'll move on to set B, and I'll take out the contents of the entire pocket, and there's a lot in there, so we've got a little bit of organizing to do. To me, that's part of the fun. It's kind of like when you're playing a card game with your friends and it's time to pick up all the cards from the previous game and get them all straightened and organized again before you shuffle and deal. That's a little bit like what we're doing here. There's a lot of little parts and pieces. No worries, we'll just get them sorted by size. Okay, then you'll want to take the card bases and bury the bumps of the score lines. So when I do that, you'll notice that the textured side of the card is on the outside, and that was why I had you score the way you did, which was texture side facing up, puts the indentation on the outside and the bump on the inside or smooth side of the textured paper. When you're working with the plain paper, if it really doesn't have a distinguishable texture, it doesn't matter which side you score on. I'm moving on to page 4 of my instructions. Let's go ahead and deal out our 4 card bases now. So that's going to be your berry metallic, your green, champagne, and wine. We got it all. Next, how about some panels here? We've got the larger plain colors. So on this first card, we'll add 2 green. To the next one, 2 wine color. Then 2 berry metallic. Oh, I have these switched here. And then finally the 2 champagne metallic on this last card. Now each one gets 2 prints. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now I'm going to distribute these panels, and there are larger and smaller. So the larger panels are going to be the wine, taupe metallic, ivory texture, and berry metallic. Then to nest, we'll add champagne, berry metallic, and it's kind of rounding out all the color distribution here. Then wine and green. And now we'll distribute some sentiments. It wouldn't seem like Christmas. And it wouldn't seem like Christmas on those top 2. And then I don't want much for Christmas. I'm going to use the red here, and I don't want much for Christmas green. And send the season's greetings, and send the season's greetings. And I just want the person reading this to be healthy, happy, and loved. Then it doesn't matter which one, they all get a Merry Christmas for the inside of the card. Lots of pieces, right? We're not even done yet. Each one of these is going to get a plain colored square. So how about the berry metallic, the green, champagne, and wine, and then a printed square. Print, 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 print. Next, I'm going to just take scissors and separate these little quatrefoil shapes, and you don't need to do this step. I'll put the green here and here. It's just kind of whatever you're in the mood for. Maybe you're not in the mood for fussy cutting. Then at last, how about an ivory belly band, a wine, a berry, and a metallic champagne. Now, I will do again what I did before, taking the envelope. All the envelopes in this set are the same size, which is kind of handy. There's one, and here's the next one. And let's make this one together. After all of that work and prep, assembly is going to be a breeze. Okay, so let's just go ahead and start out with our 2 mats, and I flipped them to the smooth side. I'm adding some ATG tape. Now there is a learning curve to dispensing tape from it, and I do have a little video out there where if you have never used something like that before, you have to be just a little patient with yourself before you just throw up your hands and give up. Loading and dispensing. It's just a skill you will master in time. Now here are 2 printed panels. Again, I'll apply the adhesive. And I'm going to visually nest these, try to center them up within those decorative, or those second panels there. So beautiful. I love this card. Okay, now we've got 2 sentiments, one for the outside flap, one for the second flap, and then a third sentiment for the inside. All right, so we're just going to worry about, not worry, but we're just going to deal with the smaller panel. So you got 2 panels, right? This sentiment goes onto the smallest panel. It wouldn't seem like Christmas goes onto the taupe or the champagne metallic there. And that's going to be an 1/8 of an inch reveal. Then I'll take the second sentiment panel, and this time the reveal is going to be larger. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to grab my ruler, and I'm just going to give this a 1/4 inch margin. That's 2 cubes on my ruler. The next task is to take the panel with the larger reveal and attach it to the right flap of the card so it's centered from top to bottom and centered from left to right as well. Okay, so when you adhere this, you want to make sure that the adhesive is only placed along the right edge of the panel. And my margin to the edge is just 3/4 of an inch. In other words, 3 solid lines on the ruler. So I'm that far from the right edge, 3 solid lines, and then 1, 2, 3 solid lines here. Make sure you're right side up. 1, 2, 3. Oh, look at that. Okay, so now this is attached. Notice there's no adhesive peeking through here, so I don't accidentally close the card for good. Now, make sure the right flap is closed first with this sentiment there, and then close the left flap on top of it. Take your sentiment that has the most narrow margin of reveal, and I'm going to place adhesive just on the left edge. This time, if I did everything right with my reveal, all I need to do now is center it, and I'm looking at the right edge here. See that? Nice reveal. All I have to do is just stick it down so that it lines up perfectly with the mat underneath it. There was absolutely no thought or planning that went into this card whatsoever, right? Okay, now for the outside, I'm going to take my scissors here. This is the one I normally use for ribbon only. I didn't grab my paper scissors. I should probably do that, but it's just such a small little project, and I love this scissors here. This is a Singer, I believe, but it's the one I use nearly exclusively for ribbon, and it cuts it nice and clean. If you mix your scissor uses, sometimes it doesn't work as well. On my sample, I did ink the edges with some ash colored ink. It's a little less harsh than black. You could also use a brown, but I just didn't want the white edges to be seen. So now I'm just going to take this little embellishment that I made here and put one foam adhesive circle on the back of it, and I will do my best to center this on top of the square. Not a lot of contrast there. Then I will attach this to the final little square here, and this is going to just cover the belly band. We'll call it Santa's belt. Okay, so the belt here is ivory, and I'm going to center the edge of my band at the center as best I can and wrap it around. Try to line up the edges, and then the critical move here is to make it so it's tight enough that it stays and loose enough that it can be removed. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, do you see how this is off center here? If you just flip them, now it's in the center. When you apply adhesive in a situation like this, I got a really easy way to do it. Once this flap is centered, open it, just the one side. I'm going to put adhesive on the back and adhesive on the top. So when I bring this back together, I've just got plenty of adhesive to hold it beautifully. And then it slides on and off, but it doesn't fall off. That's what you're after. One of mine, this one, too loose, and it falls off, so I taped it on the back. Yeah, so live and learn. Learn from me. Now this piece I'm going to put onto the center here, but before I adhere it, I'm going to take my beautiful taffeta edge green ribbon, and I'll use my fabric scissors here. So I'm going to make one of those loops, and cooperating with the grain direction of the ribbon here, and I'll cut this end at a nice angle. So pretty, right? And then I'll center it on there. I always keep my tape in a little dispenser, so I only need one hand, and tape that into place. Come in with my cute little embellishment here and center that up. That is gorgeous. Now here, I'm going to use my leftover scraps from my original prototype here. You get a full sheet of these sweet little clear dots. So whatever color you're putting this on, that's what's going to shine through, which I absolutely love. We had these specially made because I thought they were so neat. Normally if they have color, that's kind of cool too, but this just looks like little water droplets. Oh, just a nice little detail. Now on the inside of the card, you got your Merry Christmas. Now let's see what I did on this one. Now there were some scraps in pocket D, and I noticed that they were almost exactly the right size to mat. So that was, this one is 2. So I'm just gonna trim this to 2 1/4. Because why not, you know? If you just look hard enough, you can find ways to not have any scraps to deal with at the end of the day. Total guilt-free. And then I used a champagne colored anchoring strip. Maybe I used it on a different card. It's okay. I'll use green. For a skinny little piece like this, to transform it from a scrap to something you can use, I just use my bookbinding glue, which I keep in the back end of my tape dispenser, and then rest it against the ruler here to make sure it's not tilted up or downhill. Nice little anchoring device then for my sentiment. I'm going to put it just like that. I love it. Okay, so right flap, left flap, belly band. And you've got a nice, happy little Christmas card anyone would be proud to receive. Let's take a look at the rest in the set. Here's the second one. I don't want much for Christmas. And oh, I just took like a skinnier strip from the print here and cut a little V into it and used that as an anchor. And once again, I used the green piece as a, trimmed it to 2 1/4, I believe, and matted my sentiment with it. It just adds so much, right? Then we've got the other sentiment, and you can see I did a little something different with the bow here. You can just make a loop on either side. I liked the ribbon use as I demonstrated a little bit better, but here I used the other portion of this strip. So, so nice. And then our final one here, again, adding those little water droplets, really adds a lot. And then this one, just rounded the corners on the bottom. Turned out great. Okay, that is set B. Let's move on to set C. We've arrived at our final pocket. There's a lot of stuff in there, as usual. And if I planned everything correctly, our scoring should be quite easy. And before we get started on that though, let's do our normal routine of sorting things into piles by size. Ta-da! Okay, now we've got 8 things to fold. So this has the bump right here. I'm gonna bury it. And then there's the bumps on the other side, and I'll bury that. That is exactly how I want it to go, and I'll just burnish those. So bury. I know that the plain side is not how you would expect, but this is what we want on these smaller cards. And again, if it's smooth, it doesn't really matter. Make sure you're burnishing well on these, or they'll just kind of pop up. And if you did the flipping when you did the scoring, you just follow your lead from that process. So here, for example, is a card base, and here the print side, or the textured side, is facing the correct direction. That's what we're after. Okay, let's distribute the larger pieces. So that would be the green card base here, and then an ivory, another ivory, and another green. And notice that I'm putting these down so that the flap is on the left. Next, let's take the berry, the smaller piece, the metallic berry, and I'm going to distribute this so that the flat part is on the top and the folded flap is on the right. Okay, so then I'm going to go to the champagne, and then the green, and the wine. Next, I have some panels. So I'm going to go metallic, wine, berry metallic, and ivory. Each one will get a larger print and a smaller print. Now let's distribute sentiments. The music of Christmas is laughter for these top 2, and then may the miracle of Christmas on the bottom 2. Then you have the inner sentiments. The top 2 will get merry everything, And the bottom two will be wishing you a Christmas. Okay, so I'm going to take my last 3 envelopes that I have here. The 4th one we will assemble so that all you have to do is just copy. It's such a satisfying process. I don't know about you, if you've ever done my card workshops before, but to me, having all of this prep work done allows me to go somewhere, and I only need a few basic supplies to finish assembly, and it's such a relaxing and enjoyable experience. To get started on this, this is very, very simple to assemble. I'm going to begin by attaching the largest panel to the back section of my card. Now remember, you want your, always be thinking about this base, the flap will be on the left, okay? Then I've got these 2 prints, so I can go ahead and apply adhesive to these. And the larger print will embellish the left flap of this, and the smaller print embellishes, if you take that other piece, the inner flap of this smaller folded section. So just make sure it's opening like that. Now marry everything. We can go ahead and put that on the inside of this. We can now attach this second Z-fold piece to the card. The best way to do that, and it's incredibly simple. I'm just going to flip this over and apply adhesive to the parts I can see. So that means this area and this area. If you were to apply it in this area, then you make an attractive postcard. And I'll visually center this onto the card base that's folded closed. And what that does is literally applies the double Z exactly where I needed it. Now we have some fun embellishing we're going to do with this piece. And it begins with this lovely ribbon. I'm going to put it on at an angle like I did on set A cards and tape it to the back. So see what's the right side and the wrong side? This ribbon definitely has a side, a preferred side. But if you can't tell, then I guess it doesn't really matter all that much. So I'm just taping, so I'm doing a corner wrap. Next, these uber flat but completely fabulous little appliques have the ability to be sent through mail without extra postage. I need to reload this with some glue. Okay, so I put some Club Scrapbook binding glue on this, and then I will attach it to the ribbon so that the 2 edges that are more straight, you see how this runs at more of a straight line and then the other one is at more of an angle? I'm putting the straight portion across onto the cut-apart itself because then it has something to adhere to besides ribbon. It'll stick to the ribbon too, but I think it'll do a little bit better job if it's got some paper to hang on to. Okay, for the little berries, I'm going to take a piece of the metallic from the scrap pile, and I'm going to use my 1/4 inch crocodile. Now, I would prefer just a regular standard hole punch, and I don't know where mine are. I didn't feel like looking for them. Sometimes I get lazy like that. I wasn't going to hunt it down, so I work with what I got, and maybe you'll do the same. So now you can see that when I punch this hole, it's kind of bent the paper. That's okay. Just flatten it out. That's all you have to do. Just flatten my little tiny circle scrap. No problem. Then take your bookbinding glue, and I'm going to add 3 dots. 1, 2, 3. Notice I added those dots to my project and not to the berry, the fake berry. I do keep a little tweezers handy so that I can just pick it up and put it where I want them to be. Oh my gosh, this is so adorable. I just can't stand it. Then, of course, what you'll need to do is take, I like to use a craft knife for this. Take your craft knife and pick it up and then layer that right on top of the berry. Now, I would have preferred to do this after the glue is dry so those berries aren't going anywhere, but you get the idea, right? Tell me you have the idea. So lovely. Now with that done, all I need to do is center this on here. I don't even really want to pick that up. So I'm going to add my glue, or my adhesive rather, to this panel, and I'll eyeball it, but I believe it's about 3/8 of an inch reveal. And now I have this stunning, stunning card. So nice. Let's see. They're all the same except, okay, so this is the second one like it, and you can see the finished berries added. Now on the other ones, you'll notice that the wrap is in the lower left corner. It's just how the artwork and the sentiment on it dictated the wrap. So that's lower left. And then I put the additional enamel dots on top of the berries that are in the background on this one and this one. And it's so sweet. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, we also have a page kit that goes with this. And it's funny because this is a spin-off of a theme that we did earlier this year called Legacy. And this is Legacy Christmas. And when we first brought those Legacy prints into the warehouse, Craig said that looks a little like Christmas. And we agreed. And a few other members said the same thing, that the kit reminded them of Christmas. So we updated the color palette and the artwork, and we couldn't be happier with our theme this year. And hope you like it too. I look forward to seeing you in the page kit assembly workshop. Join me there.